Hello and welcome to the BitLemmas Podcast, episode 6. Today is a book review of Broken Money by Lyn Alden. The real story is money is a network, a ledger plus a set of trust boundaries, and our financial system is increasingly out of sync with the global digital world it's supposed to serve. Payments are not settlement. Most money you use day to day is a layer, an IOU. And the trust boundaries in those layers are where power and failure modes live. In the next hour, you're going to leave with a mental model you can reuse how money evolves, where checkpoints form, why some people pay a lot more to move value than others, and what a credible repair of the money system may look like. We're going to have 4 counterintuitive truths. Money is a ledger, network, not a thing. Payments and settlement are, layers are IOUs. Layers scale, but operators centralize. And a neutral settlement layer changes the game, but everything has trade-offs. If you're not finance native, or let's say Bitcoin native, don't worry, we'll define the minimum in plain English. And I'm going to be joined by B Sovereign uh, in this episode, and he's going to be making his comments. So, the thesis of the book: money is a ledger. Who owns what and who owes what? Broken money is a broken ledger governance system.
Hmm.
Technology reshapes what ledgers are possible, and people route around failure, often quietly. We'll be talking about all of these repeatedly. Some major premises. Good money moves value across time and space. Okay, we'll dig into that. The most saleable good becomes money. We're going to talk about what salability is. Flexible ledgers create power and hidden taxes. The word flexible, you may never have heard it in a negative light. We're going to be putting it in this context. It's actually not a good thing when it comes to ledgers, but we're going to expound on that. Trust matters, but rules and incentives matter more. What does this mean? When you have a ledger, and we'll dig more into this, but when you have rules, right, the ledger rules, the rules and incentives are what people are going to default to when stress happens. When there's stress, people fall back on rules and incentives, not on what they hope they wish that they did, which is what they said and where people would trust. Why does all that matter? Because we're going to talk about the human component of the ledger systems and ledger rules.
Mhm. And I think that this is probably the absolute, core of the book. We're going back to good money moves value across time and space, but the most sellable good becomes the money. So that's a market driven process, to be exact. The problem is that flexible ledgers, like those run by governments, create immense power. They have the ability to tax savers silently through inflation and devaluation. So trust in the system is the one thing, but the rules and incentives of the ledger are what truly dictate outcomes in the markets.
Definitely. So, broken money, what does it look like? Deposit freezes and capital controls. What's a deposit freeze? That's when the bank decides to limit your access to your deposits for some extended period of time where you can't get to them. That's a freeze. Capital controls, what's that? Those are rules that limit or govern the movement of money from one account to another, or from one across a border, so one nation to another, or jurisdiction to another, and also between markets, so one market to another. There are rules that can be put in place to control the capital flow. Broken money includes when you start to see those things happening. Sharp devaluations, what's that? That's when your money purchases less. Runaway inflation, again, your money is purchasing less. Now, negative real yields, what's that? Well, that's when your safe store of value. So let's say your bank account and you get some kind of yield, you get some type of interest payment. When that yield is less than inflation, that's a negative real yield. And that means you as a saver, you having dollars, keeping them somewhere, keeping them in the bank, you're quietly taxed. We're going to talk about why that's a tax. And then you have bank fragility, this duration mismatch. What is that? We'll talk about that again later. But a duration mismatch is the bank having long-term assets, and they get some type of return on those assets. But that return can't cover the short-term debts that they have. And so that can cause a bankruptcy. That can cause the bank to close.
Mm-hmm.
When people are scared of that, then they'll do a bank run and they'll try to get their deposits out.
Yep. I absolutely think that this is what should make everyone angry. I mean, from this book, I mean, if you don't know, you're about to find out. But deposit freezes, devaluations, and bank runs, like those are all things that were manufactured by the system of broken money. Anyone who feels the system is rigged, I mean, this is exactly why, right? You should not be able to just have your funds frozen at any given moment. This is a system that was solely created to transfer wealth from savers to issuers, right? It's the hidden tax that we all feel, right? We pay taxes to Uncle Sam, but then we see the prices, essentially of all of our goods just go up over time. This is exactly why.
Mm-hmm. So now we have the 4 counterintuitive truths. The first one, money is a ledger governance system. It's very counterintuitive because it is not the prevailing theory. The prevailing theory is that money is a barter system and the best commodity, the commodity theory of money, the commodity that has the properties of money that we're going to review, that's the one that becomes money. There's another system that is, or another theory of money, which is the ledger system. So this book takes that position, but it doesn't really matter which theory that you think is the history of money. The book has a lot of history of money, but it doesn't really matter because the theories that are in this book and the logic that comes from this book is compatible with both. You still have the same implications, but I believe it's a better model for reasoning about money. Now, number 2, saleability picks winners. We're going to talk about what saleability is, but kind of an understanding of that at this point is saleability is the acceptability of some commodity, so money, and the liquidity, which we'll talk about what liquidity is when we get to it. Flexibility buys power and creates instability. We already talked about flexibility being problematic. When it comes to ledger rules, we're going to dig into ledger rules soon enough. But that's the third truth. And then network money routes around constraints. This is kind of a prediction that you can try, and I think it's an important one. You can try to stop people from, you can put in capital controls and so other things. You can try to stop people from exchanging goods and services in whatever way they want, but they're going to find a way around it. It's kind of a prediction in that way, and they're going to find the best way around that ends up being some form of money. We'll dig into that. So truth number one, money is a ledger with governance. So a ledger, and then I'll back up a bit here. You can think the mental model of this book of money is a ledger plus governance plus network effects. So we're going to be drilling into that as we go along. So a ledger is a shared memory of ownership. You can have different types of shared memory. You can have it written down. You can have it be physical. We're going to talk about that. So that's where it can be kind of counterintuitive, right? And you can have it be mental. So a social type ledger. Governance is who can change the ledger's rules, who has the right to change the rules, who can change them, and also including in that, how hard is it to change the rules? What are the consequences of changing the rules? Right? And so what's changing the rules? What does that matter? Oh, you can print money and you can give it to who you want. So that it's important to who can change the rules. Different monies differ mainly by governance. So when you are judging different local currencies, let's say if you're comparing Argentinian currency with American currency, let's say, you want to judge the currency by how it's governed. How is it governed? Like what we said, who can change the rules of the money? How easily can they change the rules of the money? What are the consequences? If it, then kind of the author's view is if you're not looking at that, then you're not really judging accurately the money, the comparison of the money. You may be doing what most people do, which is, hey, how much can I buy with this money? And then how much can I buy with this one? And that's not getting at the base problem of the money.
Yeah. It sounds like it's just another problem, to be honest.
Yeah, finding out which or how to judge or who can change, it seems like something. So broken often means governance is captured. What does captured governance mean? A captured governance, and this goes for any regulatory capture, right? So captured governance is when a small group is able to change the rules and incentives and the access to the value that the rules govern to where it benefits them. That's a captured governance. So you can apply to money, you can captured governance, but you can also apply to telecommunications regulatory frameworks if you want.
All right. Think, national debts. I don't know, maybe to the tune of like 38 trillion. Talking about the US.
Yeah. Yeah. Printing money in order to service the debt. We'll talk about that. But that's one of the benefits, not the benefits for the people getting their money diluted, but one of the benefits of the people who want to govern the ledger and have it be flexibility. They want to, we're going to get into it, but they want to service the debt is one of the things that they're going to do. So they're going to print money to pay for the old loans. We'll talk about that. This diagram here, I think, is quite useful for understanding the different types of ledgers and the way you may currently think about what money is. Remember, the model is that money really is a ledger plus how that ledger is governed. Remember, a ledger is who owns what and who owes what, right? And then we'll get into the network effect later. But now, on the left, you have nature governed ledgers. Commodity money. What is that? Gold, let's say. When people think of some type of money for exchanging, buying, value, all these things, we're going to talk about all these properties. But the ledger has rules. What are the rules of gold? Physics and scarcity. Wait a minute. When we're talking about the rules, we're talking about who owns what and who owes what. So if you have a piece of gold, you have a Spanish doubloon in your hand, it's worth $800, I think, or something. It's probably worth much more than that, but just the gold, pure gold of it. If you hand that over to another person, that's called settlement. You gave them, maybe you purchased something, but when they have custody and they leave, it's settled. That exchange is settled. The physics of you giving that to them, that's the ledger. You owned it, and now the ledger, that token, the gold, moved to the other person, and now they own it. That's the rules governed by physics. Scarcity, of course, gold is scarce, silver scarce, and there's different levels of scarcity, but that's not something, those rules aren't something that someone can change arbitrarily. It's governed by the physics of the how to produce that token. So that in this case, the gold, how to produce that commodity. There's a certain amount of energy and time that's associated with creating that form of money. So gold. So that's mining in this case.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds a lot like proof of work, in order to bring more gold into circulation, you have to go and mine it, which used to take, physical energy. You're out there with a pickaxe and you're working and you are getting the gold, which is what mining is, for Bitcoin, but except with electricity.
Yeah, and we'll get into that one. The proof of work is the last type of ledger here, the user governed ledger. So yeah, the next type is state governed ledger, which is fiat and central banks. Fiat meaning by decree. So in this case, this is the traditional idea of what a ledger would be. It's a recording of who owes what and who owns what, right? So you can imagine a spreadsheet. You have names, and you could say this person owns this and this person owns that. Traditionally, as a side note, or historically, some of the first writing in the Sumerian tablets, let's say, was a ledger of a recording of people exchanging things like grain. And so that historically, it's people recording commodities and quantities and debts, right? Now, this is traditionally when someone says a ledger and they're in accounting or if you've done anything with any type of software that deals with the ledger, you're thinking of it in this way. Now, what is it that governs the ledger? Rules, so law and policy. These are flexible. These can be changed by humans. What does it cost to change the ledger, to have control over the rules of the ledger? Who can add? Remember, the rules of the ledger, you can add, you control access to the value, right? And you can print and you can do all kinds of things. What does it cost? It costs political power, which is tremendously expensive. If you think of who is it that controls the money printing and how much political power, how much would it cost to get that political power? It's very expensive to be controlling the money printer in the United States, let's say, but probably any country. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the way I think about it is, if you wanted to, buy whatever you want, just imagine you could just go over to your printer and just make some counterfeit money, and you could just, buy whatever you want, right? If you had that ability, I mean, you can essentially be living the good life. You could have a mansion, you could have a Ferrari, you can have all of these things, and you really didn't really have to work too much for it. Just at the tap of a finger, you were able to make money appear like magic, and that has given you immense power. Just imagine that on a much large nation state type scale.
Yeah. Now, to acquire the political power isn't a small feat, but of course, some people probably just inherit it, but that's neither here nor there. Right? As far as the political power. So user governed ledger, what's that? Open source money, another name for it. What is this? This is the rules of the ledger are governed by consensus. So that's consensus of the users of the ledger. Okay. Now, what does that cost? Adoption. Why is that expensive? It's very expensive to try to get a bunch of people that you may not have any physical contact with or never met to agree to certain rules. When you want to change the rules, then that can cause all types of conflict, and people may not want to go with you. So it's basically herding cats. So the status quo is going to dominate. Also, who is it that verifies the rules? How are they enforced? It's enforced also by the users. So this is a user governed ledger. And one of the things about that is the rules are significantly harder to change than a state governed ledger, as far as from the perspective of who controls the rules, because basically the users control the rules, which they have to all agree. Whereas with a state governed ledger, if you were to say you're a user of the American dollar, you're in the United States, it's tremendously difficult for you to try to change the rules of the ledger and try to print for you to get it. We'll talk about all the implications of that. But it's very easy for those who are already in power to decide to print whatever they want.
This is like the definition of like money that is by the people for the people.
100%. I couldn't agree more. So again, ledger rules define incentives. We talked about nature governed ledgers. They're very hard to cheat. What does that mean? Gold, it's hard to try to cheat the physical rules of creating gold. You have to mine it. Now, you can create fake gold and pawn that off. We're going to talk about that later with verifiability as one of the properties of money. But it's still hard to cheat. State and central bank ledgers, you have a physical supply and selective access. What does that mean? Again, with the flexibility, they can change the rules, print, and they can also, we'll talk about this multiple times, but there's the Cantillon effect. The selective access, when there's money printing, so you change the rules and you say, okay, it's time to print. You can decide to give the money, loan the money to people that are close to the money printer or the trough, the feeding trough. Why does that matter? We'll talk about this, but the people who, when you print money, there's inflation because there's more supply. when you print money, the people who are closer to it would take the money that you printed and invest it in. They feel the effects of the inflation less. The people who are further down or further away from the money printer, they feel inflation more. So this creates inequality. So this is part of this selective axis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, broken money, I mean, it's simply when the governance of the ledger is captured to serve the few at the expense of many.
That is a good way to put it, especially with the state bank ledger form. Now, you have user governed ledgers, so the rules are visible, transparent, and they're contestable. The users can say, well, I don't like those rules. I'm not going to verify those rules. So this is a user governed ledger, and this is why it requires broad consensus in order to change the ledger rules. Now, this last point, governance failure is usually slow until it isn't. What does she mean here? So a failure of the governance of money, the ledger, right? So if you're talking about state and central ledgers where you can change the rules, that is based, obviously, like we said, on policy and law, but it's also based on reputation and trust, right? And integrity. Now, when a set of rules are based on reputation, right? They're not hard-coded like some software. They're based on reputation and integrity and trust. They hide failure until it's too late, basically. So that's what can create all of the system shocks, like you could say a 2008, so on and so forth. And then it seems like everything should fail, but everything is running fine. You think it's running fine, but it's hidden. So that's what she means there. So truth number 2, salability picks winners. What is salability? Money is the most saleable good in a society. It's the thing that is the most accepted and the most liquid. Now, accepted meaning, okay, other people will take it for exchange. Liquid, what does that mean? The more liquid something is in this context, the more or the less of a discount that you'll have to give when exchanging it. Let's say that in another way. So if you were to buy a Ferrari and the Ferrari's $500,000 and you're to go there with cash, you're good. Or you go there with, a bank draft, you're good. But if you go there with $500,000 worth of gold, it's counterintuitive, but they may say, no, we don't accept gold. Go sell it and give us some dollars. You may say, no, I want to give you gold. I'll give you $1 million worth of gold if you will take it and give me the Ferrari. They may, that extra $500,000, that is the discount. That's how much you had to pay for them to take your gold, your physical gold, right? So there's all these, we'll talk about it as far as these different properties of money, but it could be that they don't like the portability of gold. They don't like, oh, I'm going to have to store it somewhere, or
it's so heavy.
all of this. Yes. Yeah. So that with the liquidity, it's the discount part that allows you to exchange or to grade how liquid a money is, or anything, any market. So good money moves value across space and time. We're going to talk about that in the next slide. And then the story matters. What does that mean? But salability wins in the long run. What does this mean? So if you were to think about the story of, say, gold and silver, I'm going to bring this up again, right? You can say that gold is worth worth a whole bunch right now. It's worth, $4,400 an ounce, I believe. And you could talk about the story of silver, and you could talk about gold doubloons, Spanish doubloons, right? And you could talk about some other silver coin, and you could talk about how there's debasement. So when we'll talk about this later, but when, say, a king says, you know what, I'm going to scrape I'm going to issue these silver coins, but I'm going to scrape some of the silver off. That's the,
Mhm.
I'm going to use it for somewhere else. You have all this narrative that goes around, whatever. It doesn't matter if people accept it, and then it's liquid. That's what's in. We'll revisit this, different laws that apply to this. But the saleability is the thing of the commodity. When the thing that you're trying to use as gold, as money, is going to crowd out the other alternatives that you would use. So we'll revisit this later.
And I would say this is specifically important for when governments or just any type of when the few are setting the rules on what is legal tender, right? Of what mode of currency is going to be used in society, right? That essentially is kind of a way of controlling, what is actually going to be used as a mode of exchange. Like gold wasn't going to be exchanged or accepted by the government at one point until they had classified, say, the US dollar as the legal tender, as of what they would always accept.
Yeah, and I guess the implication of that is the control over, especially when you're talking about governments, they have the trump card. They basically say, guess what? You have to pay your taxes, and then old school before your tribute, right?
Yeah.
You have to pay it in what we define, what
Yep.
we decide. And
Yep.
so that they can, so they have a very strong incentive on what they pick, or governments or kings or what have you, what they pick for the money.
Mhm.
It doesn't necessarily win though, but it is
Mhm.
a strong incentive.
Mhm. Pretty much do whatever you want to do, but just remember you're going to pay those taxes to me in the currency that I want.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's funny because they can also end up saying, I don't want this currency either as
Yeah.
well. So,
I'll take their currency,
I'll take the gold. I'll take the gold. Thanks. So we have saleability across space and time. This whole idea of space and time and money. What does it mean? So across space, we have portability. That's the ability to take, or the ease of bringing the money from one place to another. Can you bring it in physically from one country to another, or down the street? If it's very expensive, if it's very heavy, right? Or it's very flashy and you're scared of someone stealing it from you, these types of things, right? Then you don't really want to move it. So there's less, but you can have, in comparison, things that are able to be like digital, they can be transferred quite easily. Then verifiability. So again, let's take gold as an example. Can you verify the gold that it's real? Are you a gold expert? There are ways to do it. But when someone comes and says, here's, some gold coins, or, some ounces of gold, right? You, the level of your ability to be able to say, oh, this is real, I'm going to accept it. Because remember, it's final settlement. Once they give it to you and you're gone, you're going to have to track them down. So the verifiability is also a part of the space component. And then you have settlement, right? So when you send this thing across space and they receive it, is it final? So this can be confusing. People don't really have gold. They have IOUs to gold. They have
Mhm.
little notes that say, I have this gold with this person, with this group. And you send that from one place to another, or, right? And let's say you just hand it off to someone and they have the IOU. Well, you don't know if that's a real IOU, or you don't know if that counterparty or that third party is going to honor that IOU. You don't know any of that stuff. You may
Right. You
it may be that the counterparty actually is doing a fractional reserve type scam and they don't
yeah.
really have all the gold.
Yep. Yep. That's exactly what I was about to say. There's no telling that. It's pretty much by having that note, it's just saying, hey, trust me, the gold's there, right? This is absolutely backed by something. But to be honest, it could be backed by fool's gold, right? Who is doing quality controls to make sure that the money or the commodity that it's backed by truly exists?
Yeah. So IOU is you are now on a ledger ledger system that is no longer a physical ledger. You're now on the equivalent of the state ledger system. This is the trust system where human policies and laws define it. You're just dealing if you're doing IOUs, you're with a gold company, you're dealing with the regulation that surrounds them and then their integrity, right? So you're now they can say, which people may not realize, but and this is also in the book, but banks started as goldsmiths and they had IOUs with the golds because they had vaults, and so people would deposit their gold in the with the goldsmith and say, "Hey, give me an IOU," and then people would start handing the IOU, and they say, Can I transfer this over to someone?" And it has their name on it, and you'll just accept it. And then they're like, "Sure," and you start doing this, holding your gold there, and you start. This is the evolution of notes, and that became banks.
Mm.
So that whole thing is the same. You have all the same issuer risk, which is them issuing an IOU. You have issuer risk when you have a claim to a physical commodity. So this again, we're getting into the weeds here, but this is across space. So across time, you have durability. So if you are trading in grain or corn, right? Oh, it can only last so long. People may want it. It may it may be very liquid. You could live in a community where lots of people want corn, right? Or rice or something. But how long does it last? So that's durability, right? And so that can be how you judge a commodity or money, let's say. Then you have scarcity. How easy is it to produce this money, right? So when we're talking about physical, silver is easier to produce, mine, than gold. So it's less scarce. But there's also some other implications there. Silver is also used more than gold, so it gets taken off the market more. But you could just say that it's less scarce, and so because it's less scarce, less valuable, right? You also have the credibility. What is that? That's again going back to the ledger rules. So if you are talking about local currencies and you're in some country and they say we're going to pay you in our local currency, let's say Argentina, and you're saying, okay, I am judging the ledger rules of this currency you're giving me for this service that I'm providing, this good I'm giving to you, and I don't know if they're going to change it tomorrow. They're going to print money. They're going to do whatever. That's the credibility when you're talking about the ledger system. When it's a physical ledger, again, handing off, then it's going to be super, credible. But over time, right? So someone gives you uh, some Argentinian money. Over time, you can think that the ledger rules change or whatever, and you could lose value. Maybe they're going to start printing or whatever, and that's the credibility. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying. I mean, the way to think about it, when the blacksmiths, were the ones holding the gold and creating all of those notes, it's like you as an individual had to have immense trust and the blacksmith, knowing that they were going to do right by you and they weren't going to, lend on top of your gold to somebody else. Right.
Right. And they did. So, this is the beginning of the fractional reserves. So the most saleable good, the way you determine that, you have these higher categories, these higher properties of money. So this is the three categories that people will usually associate when they're judging money. So you have unit of account, which that is the way that people are going to price things on the market. So most people are going to price things on the market. So if you're thinking of how much for a barrel of oil, people say right now, I think it's $100 a barrel, and they're going to say dollars. So that would be the unit account. It's the thing that most people use to price. Medium of exchange is what people use to exchange. So this is what you would traditionally think of as money. It's like, oh, the thing I can use to exchange with someone else to get a good or service. Then you have the store of value, which is quite important because you can exchange and you could be pricing, but this store of value is, can it keep the value? So we're talking about purchasing power. So if you have $10 today, can you buy, and you can buy 10 widgets with it, can you buy 10 widgets with it tomorrow? That's the store of value. Is it a good store of value? Right? Now, salability compounds. What does that mean? The more widely held some type of money is, the more liquid it's going to become, because the more accepted it is and it has a certain level of liquidity, more and more people want to use it to exchange. So it starts to crowd out and dominate. And we're going to talk about this domination some more. Right here. So why some monies win and others lose. So we talked about durability. We didn't talk about divisibility. So if you have this Spanish doubloon, which is say $800 right now of gold, right? This coin, and you want to buy a coffee, well, you're not going to be able to break the gold coin up into pieces in order to buy the coffee. So that's not divisible, or it's less divisible. Portable, you can keep gold coins in your pocket, bring them somewhere. But can you send them overseas? Then it starts to be problematic. Verifiable. One of the things with coinage, right? This was in the book, but you had raw gold nuggets, and then you had people debasing, you had people creating their own coins and all this other seals, right, from goldsmiths and other things. The coinage started kind of evolved to where the kings said, well, I'm going to guarantee that this is a real gold coin because we have all these other people debasing. And of course, I can enforce it with, if you put my seal on a gold coin, then you're going to be killed, right? So you can enforce that, and then it's a lot more verifiable when you have this seal of the king on it. So that's this evolution of verifiability within coinage and money, right? And then of course we talked about scarcity. So this is some of the properties on why some monies will win. We talked about salability and liquidity. It compounds. The more widely held, the more easy it is to trade, right? And the less of a discount you have to give in order to trade it. Now, hard to produce helps defend the ledger over time. What does that mean? Again, it's harder if it's harder to create or mine gold than silver, right? Then you don't have a whole bunch of money entering into the market and devaluing other things. The more money, right, notes, gold, whatever commodity you're talking about, the less valuable it is. The more, that's inflation. Now, This last point, bad money creates asset substitution behavior. What does this mean? So we got to talk about, we're going to use gold as the example. So the Spanish doubloon, and we'll talk about a silver piece. So there's Grisham's law. Grisham's law is that good money crowds out the bad money. What does that mean? What is bad money in this sense? Uh, so good money, let's say that everyone loves the gold doubloon, 800, it's worth $800 at this point right now, the amount of gold that's in it. And then you have the silver, both the silver coin, and they're both circulating. And the king says, the Spanish king says, I'm not going to debase the gold coin, but I am going to debase the silver coin. What does that mean? We're going to shave off some silver from it, and it's going to be worth, it was worth $100, let's say, and now it's really the amount of silver that's in there, it's really worth $50, but you're going to use it like it's 100, and I'm going to have this other $50 worth of silver, and I can use that to finance other things, all my other expenses. This is debasement. Right? And so what happens, that means that the people are going to notice, they start to notice, and then they don't treat the silver coin as good money. But what happens, counterintuitively, they use the silver coin more because they want to get rid of it. And they keep the gold coin. So that now people are investing in asset, the better money. And so after all of the bad money spent in this scenario, it's the silver coin. Then you have the good money, the gold coin becomes dominant. And so this is this convergence onto, the one ring to rule them all, or, if you like Lord of the Rings, or if you like the Highlander, is there can only be one, right? There can only be one real money that dominates, because it will get crowded out. So yeah.
Yep. It's a simple, brutal concept. The most liquid, portable, durable, verifiable, and scarce goods win. It's a market-driven competition. Liquidity compounds. The more people who accept it, the more useful it becomes. And this is why story can only carry like a currency so far. Eventually, the physics of sellability went out.
Yep. Now we're going to get into layered money. This is one of the ways to critique money that people may not use as much as they should. They think of money as all, all clumped together, and there's really different kinds of money, and this allows you to have a more nuanced critique. So you have really base money and broader money, right? Base money and broad money. So base money, what is that? That's stuff you can use for final settlement. Once it goes exchanges from one place to another, it's done. So examples, obviously gold, but you have central bank reserves, which could be gold, it could be treasuries. And then the author is saying that Bitcoin is also something that would be a base level, which is, it has the property of being final settlement. Then you have bank money. So there's base money, and then there's the broader money that's on top of the base money. So all of that is deposits and credit. So IOUs, what we talked about earlier. All of that, what people normally think of as having money, you really have a claim, a promissory note. Like when you look on physical cash, it's a claim to money, right? Now, before 1971, you used to be able to take your American dollar and exchange it for gold. After that, it wasn't based on gold anymore. Now we call it being based on debt. But this is all, you could call it within the Bitcoin community, they call it layer 2 or layer 3. But within this way of reasoning, it's the broad layer. It's not the base layer. And you have other layers that can go on top of, let's say, bank deposit and all that, where it's credit layers. So more and more IOUs based on other IOUs, right? So it's quite convenient, but you have counterparty risk, which we talked about before, where it is, you have an IOU, you exchange it to someone else, right? Like when I say IOU, to be clear, let's say it's for gold. You have a claim that says I'm owed 1 ounce of gold, and then the goldsmith is the one that holds the gold for you. The same thing with a deposit in a bank or some other credit. You exchange it to someone else, you give the IOU to them, and you kind of are treating it like what people are calling a bearer asset. You're saying, if you have it, you have the money. But the counterparty, the third party, they can say, I don't want to honor that claim. So all of those rules, that's the ledger system, and those are ledger rules. And that's what you need to reason about when you're talking about different layers of money. When you're talking about settlement, you're not running or reasoning about or worrying about any of those changes of rules.
And I'd say, I mean, this is a crucial understanding for fragility. We don't use base money for everything. We use layers. You have a base money, either gold, Bitcoin, bank money deposits, bank money, which is deposits or an IOU. And then you have credit, an IOU on an IOU, which is, I mean, double risk. So each layer adds convenience, but also adds counterparty risk. And the system is fragile because the layers of credit and IOUs can get out of sync with real hard base layer underneath, you know. So think the gold and Bitcoin. That's the issue with, you know, paper money,
right?
Fiat,
right, by decree. So here's a good time to contemplate some of the reasons or rationale on what you use money for. And then it can help you to reason about some of the things that we're going to get into. So obviously, you use it for daily spending, fast and convenient. People think of their Visa when they're thinking of this, right? But you want some category of money that's fast and convenient. You want something that holds value over time. We just talked about inflation and the dollar loses its purchasing power. So you want something else that has, we know we have this nomenclature of store of value. You want something that holds its value or increases in value. You may want to escape hatch, portable across borders. You live in the United States, you're like, I'm not worried about that. Well, if you lived in Lebanon, maybe you do want your money to be able to go across the border without you having to ask permission first, because you may have to do that quickly. And then you have privacy and censorship resistance. Again, you live in a place that has a regime that wants to censor and capture all the money, and you don't want them, let's say that you're an activist, you don't want them to see what you have, but then also censorship, you don't want them to be able to point at you and make you and unbank you. So these are other things about money that you need to reason about, not only if you don't need these, but if the money provides for these properties, it will be valuable and more saleable to other places, like whole other countries in the world. And we're going to talk about that some more. Now, counterintuitive truth number 3: flexibility buys power and also creates instability. Now, what does this mean? Flexible ledgers can finance emergencies fast. Let's talk about why governments love flexible ledgers. Flexible ledgers allow a government to finance its expenses by expanding the money. So they will print money to pay for what they want to do. We're going to talk about some of the things that a government wants to do. One of them is war, right? So they love to be able to expand the money supply. That in order to do that, you need a flexible ledger. What happens when you expand the money supply, right? Well, you create inequality. Remember, we talked about the Cantillon effect, right? So the people closer to the money printer, they're able to take some of that money and put it where they want as far as assets. But also, you're also punishing the savers. You're diluting the money. And so whoever it is that has dollars in their bank account, they have less money. They have less purchasing power, I should say. So governments love doing this. This is why we have flexible ledgers in money. And we could stay here all day on this. But on to the next point. Flexibility enables opaque redistribution. Let's talk about this a little bit more. The Cantillon effect, again. If you were to see a bunch of people getting 0% interest loans, there's also such thing as a negative interest rate. They're paying people to take the loan. They're paying them to take the loan. So they print the money and give it to a set of people, and they can turn around and put it in an interest. They can put it in an asset. That's opaque. You don't get to see who they're doing that with. That redistribution. That is also, with this flexibility, you have this opaque redistribution, which allows for them to basically pull the wool over the eyes of people. Right? So that's very useful to governments. And then you have debt-based money tends towards instability. We are on a debt system now. And we have another slide, but they actually want this because you have all types of moral hazard. You have it to where basically the regular people we just talked about, they're the ones financing they're losing their purchasing power. They're the ones financing what the government, when they print money, right? And they pay for whatever it is that they want to finance. They want that instability, counterintuitively, because it helps to, for the purposes that they're wanting to do. So savers get pushed into risk assets over time. What does this mean? The people who want to save their dollars, right? You can go ahead and lose your purchasing power, or you can move your money into a risk asset, let's say real estate, or let's say gold. Let's put it in something else. What does that do? It creates a K-shaped economy. So you have the people who have assets, right? And they are on, if you can imagine a K, there's the leg that goes upwards. These are the people who have assets, and they get more and more, the money, their assets build and compound over time. And then you have the bottom leg for the people who don't have assets, and they are also the ones who save in dollars, right? Or they're not saving at all, and they're just trying to make ends meet. Their purchasing power is decreasing more and more, so they can't even buy assets because their purchasing power is decreasing more, right? So this is the last part of this whole concept of wanting a flexible ledger in order to finance expenses. We'll talk about on the next slide. I think it's going to be things like war. So we have this flexible ledger with this opaque state finance. Flexible public ledger, we just talked about that, where they can change the rules whenever they want, right? Basically, it's based off of policy and law, but they can print. Now, why do they love that? Again, you take the expenses, like I gave the example of, you have the gold doubloon, and you had this silver that they were debasing. You could also debase the gold doubloon. It eventually did get debased. What you take those, like if you can imagine someone shaving the coin and taking the gold and saying, okay, this, just imagine a king doing it and saying, okay, here's a gold doubloon that used to be $800 worth. Now it's $500 worth. And I'm going to take that extra money and I'm going to pay soldiers to go to war. Now, if you can imagine, if you had to go into a multi-trillion-dollar war and you had to pay for it now, you would never be able to go to war because the people would not pay for it. They just wouldn't do it. But it's great to go ahead and print and finance the war. You can also finance what's deficits, right? Basically, what you already owe, you borrowed as a government, as a state, you can finance that debt. They call that rolling over the debt. So you can print more money in order to pay off stuff that was a loan previously, and not even paying it completely off. You're just paying the interest on it. That's one. You can also bail out, and this is going to matter more later in this diagram, but you can also bail out the people who are irresponsible actors by printing the money and giving it to them, right? So now, every time you print money, you devalue the money. This is, to me, it shouldn't be controversial, but it is a controversial thing. The dominant view of money right now is that you have MMT is one version, but there's other versions of reasoning about money where you print it, and the most people cite John Maynard Keynes as the general theory of money and interest as the argument for, hey, you can just print money and you won't the main thing you should be reasoning about is not the inflation part, is what it ends up coming to, but you won't devalue it. I'm saying, oh no, it's getting devalued. Everybody can kind of intuitively feel it, right? And then of course the inflation, right? So both inflation is your value of money. There's more money supply. Now, the last part of this is asset substitution. We talked about this previously, but you have it to where when you're doing the money printing, the Cantillon effect, you have the people closest to the money printer. They turn around, they take the loans, 0% interest sometimes, and they turn around and they buy assets, right? The closer they are, the more capability you have that. They don't feel the effects of inflation as much or at all. And then people later, they do feel it. They have inequality. They can't get 0% interest loans. I can't get it. You can't get it, right? So it's going to be some type of inequality. This is all part of the system where you have the point being a flexible ledger rule, right? Is when you're talking about money and you're talking about governance system for money, the whole idea is that money is a ledger and there's a governance to that ledger, no matter what type of money you're talking about, commodity, state money, or Bitcoin or open source money, whatever it is, there's a ledger. And if it's flexible rules on it, then you're going to go down this, you're going to have some type of elitism for the people who can control it. And they're going to go down here and you're going to get to this K-shaped economy.
Yep. I would say the key here is really the instability and inequality. Like we all know that trickle down economics does not exist. When money is being printed at the top and, they're using it to, pay bad actors. Let's think 2008 while, the banks were crashing because they wanted to create some type of created debt restructuring, right? Which ultimately failed and caused a huge financial crisis, right? The government, they came out essentially and printed a whole bunch of money because they needed to save the country, or else everybody was going to be in dire straits, right? All of that money didn't go down to the people. It went to these big corporations that didn't necessarily deserve it. They were the ones that created the problem, and they were the ones that got the money to fix it. But what about the normal person? The person who really suffered was us, the ones who didn't have the printer to just, create all this money. And all of that inflation has, since '08 until now, all you see is just prices going up astoundingly faster than they were prior to.
That's right. People's purchasing power has decreased. I could say in the 70s, my dad's house was worth $16,000, but that may not hit home that much. But $16,000 was probably around 2x of what your of the average yearly pay would be. Now we're talking 5x, 6x, 7x of the average pay to purchase a house. That's one of the things that you lose purchasing power when you have this system. That if you talk to an economist, they will dance around all of this stuff and say, well, the money printing isn't that bad. There's something you don't understand about the properties of managing money. It's a special commodity. It's a very special commodity where you don't have to, it's not necessarily bad when you print, because you can finance, one idea is you can finance and you can pay for infrastructure, and that increases the system, it increases the amount of wealth that's in the system, or efficiencies, or so on and so forth. There's a bunch of ways you can talk about it or reason about it. So there is a pushback on this view, and I will say that this view here is the minority view of economists, as far as saying, oh, printing money is bad and a scam, right? But I just wanted to offer that. Now, what does the author say here about the banking? It's fragile by design. That's a strong claim. And what do they mean here? So banks do maturity transformation. What is that? They lend out long, right? So they have long-term assets, and they take short-term debts. What's a debt? Like your deposit, right? So you deposit money in the bank and they owe you. That's a debt, right? So now, you can call it maturity transformation. We talked about this previously. So what's a long-term asset? A long-term asset would be a long-term bond. You could have short-term bonds, long-term bonds, all this other stuff. But when you have your short-term debts, and the cost of the short-term debts outweighs the revenue you're getting from your long-term assets, then you have a serious issue. Now, rate shocks create losses. What do we mean here? We talked about this duration mismatch, this long-term assets, right, and your short-term debts, and this balancing act. Remember, let's say treasuries, right? There's long-term treasuries, bonds. There's a market for them. They can be sold, and they can be reduced in value when there's less demand for them. So if you have an interest rate for the long term and you have an interest rate for the short term, and people are like, oh, I want to buy some long term. No, I don't want to buy the long term. That should have a great interest rate because you're holding my money for a long time. But these short term, they have a great interest rate. They have a better interest rate. Why would I lock up my money for years when I can just do it for days or months? So I'm going to go over here to short term. Now there's less demand for the long term. Oh, now the bank is getting less. They have less value in their long-term asset. Now you have a problem. On top of that, when you have these great, like higher rates or what have you, when you make other assets attractive, so higher rates. So let's say short-term treasury bonds. Now you have a deposit flight risk. Why? Because people say, why, if I can hold my money over here for a few months, I'm going to take my deposits out of the bank. I'm going to put it over here and then have a better interest rate because it's better. Now I'm hurting the bank again because they have to have a certain amount of deposits in order to do their fractional reserve bank and all that. So now they have to get rescued. Now, the point of the fragile by design with the too big to fail. Oh, we have to get rescued. Now you have the FDIC and all this other stuff as far as insuring them, but also just printing money and giving it to them. The whole idea of this too big to fail, now you're rewarding the bad behavior of taking risky bets. But right there, because they're not punished, right? So now this stability, you have these backstops. So you have FDIC, you have this whole printing money, quantitative easing, and going ahead and just, we're going to inject money into the system so we can have more liquidity and credit so the credit doesn't seize. Okay, yeah. But now that's great, right? So I remember in 2008, whole small businesses, they just shut up. People pay their payroll with their credit cards. They have a line of credit, and hey, we have how much payroll? 100,000 a month, and you have a line of credit, and you're not getting paid at 100,000 for 3 months. You have some, you have a accounts receivable. You have people that, or you have customers that are going to pay you, but they're going to pay you 3 months from now. You have to pay your W-2. You have to pay your payroll now. Okay, fine. You have a line of credit, 100,000. They just shut it off. The banks are like, okay, you don't have no more line of credit. It's gone. You can't pay people. That happened all over in 2008. And so there was no one arguing against save the banks that had to handle payroll in 2008. They're like, oh yeah, we're in a serious problem right now. And the banks are like, yep, you better give us some money because we'll just shut everyone off. All of that, your credit card and all of that stuff, that is a claim. And they don't have to even honor that. That's not even a claim, your credit. So there you go.
Yeah, this is the Faustian bargain of state governed money. A flexible ledger lets governments finance wars and emergencies instantly, but that same flexibility enables the opaque redistribution of wealth through inflation. The banking system, like we've stated, is a perfect example. It does maturity transformation, borrowing short and lending long, which is inherently fragile, right? We see those issues in the bond markets, in the finance field with however the curve may be shaping. If we have an inverted curve, a yield curve that's inverted, we have issues, right? It works fine until it doesn't, and then it requires a bailout, which is paid for essentially by, you guessed it, it's us, the savers.
100%. So now we got truth number 4, network money routes around constraints. The first premise here is global trade needs a settlement asset. You can kind of reason about this is, okay, I'm buying a $10 million, $100 million purchase overseas, a bunch of, weapons, let's say, I don't, whatever it is. They're going to want, when you're making those big purchases, you're going to want it to be irreversible. You want it to be final settlement. So you kind of need more settlement asset when you're doing global trade. Local currencies are often unsaleable. They're not acceptable abroad, right? So if somebody wants to pay you in Argentinian pesos or what have you, you're going to say, no, I want to get paid in dollars, whatever. People converge on the least bad ledger available. Okay, of course, right? So let's talk about, people are, the global reserve currency is going to be the dollar, right? Then the last point, though, tech makes new escape hatches. So here in this escape hatch, we're talking about being able to get or purchase something globally using a different ledger than your local currency. So there's new ways that tech allows for new ways to route and pay. So now we have this global settlement, currencies and reserve assets. And we have this diagram. We have another one right after. We have 160 fiat currencies, mostly local, and they can't be used outside of their own country. No one wants them. They're not saleable, right? You need a primary settlement asset. Remember, that's a part of that is being a unit of count, what you price things as. So what people broadly think of as the price. Again, a barrel of oil, you can think of, it's $100, dollars being the unit of account. Then you have the US dollar, like what I'm saying, that's a reserve currency system for the world. But what does that do when you have a reserve currency? Remember all this, flexible ledger. It creates imbalances. Okay, when the United States prints money and other people peg their money, right? They try to peg their money to our money. Oh, we export the chaos to everyone else. So when we have our inflation, everyone else has way more inflation. They're even worse. So we have the least bad, but they're way, what's bad, but least bad broken. But theirs is even worse. Then we have leverage. what does that mean? Oh, we can sanction you. If we have the global reserve currency, another name for it is the exorbitant privilege. We can print money, literally, and we can also sanction you and say, you know what, when we're negotiating with you, it'd be a shame if all those treasuries you bought, we just went ahead and said they're worthless now, and you no longer have those, which we did do to Russia, I believe. So now it's getting back to the whole routing around broken money. And this concept, we're having dollars, then we're going to talk about stable coins, and also the author talks about Bitcoin. So we have local money. We just talked about that. We have 160 currencies that are unsaleable, right? And you have their own local money printing. So they're devaluing the, say the Argentinian peso, what have you. They have their own problems. Now, there's one story of, let's say in Argentina, people would get paid on their paycheck on Friday, and they would race home to change that money, right, their local currency, into dollars, physical dollars. Why? Because they would lose so much money in inflation just in that little bit of time that they were racing to exchange it. But those physical dollars are offline.
Yeah, and I gotta say, Argentina isn't the only country that employed this method. I mean, you have El Salvador, you have countries all throughout Africa. I know in Southeast Asia, that's been prominent. In Laos, that's in Burma. They use that because currency devaluation, it happens so fast. But Bitcoin, it's easier to get a hold on and retain your wealth. It has a limited supply, so I mean that's hard money, and it's going to hold its value. So it's the wonders and the beauty of it being a global digital asset.
Right. And but before we get to Bitcoin, there's this concept of stable coins, right? So people have they're exchanging for physical dollars. Well, the physical dollars aren't as portable as the digital dollars, these stable coins. So the stablecoin market is for this group, specifically for this group that transfers their local money into physical dollars. They want that. So they have the stablecoin that's portable across the world, but you have their own issues with stablecoin that we're going to get into. But one of the benefits of stablecoin is it's pegged to the dollar. There is no volatility. That's one of the things that it is supposed to be. There's no volatility outside of the natural, I would say the unnatural inflation that the dollar has, right? Yeah. But it's less volatile than Bitcoin by far. So then you have Bitcoin. Again, we talked about open source bearer asset, as far as final settlement. But people choose what's the most saleable plus accessible. So if people are accepting Bitcoin locally, it'll be saleable. They'll use it. If people want to exchange dollars, they may want to go with the stablecoin. So, this is this whole idea, but the concept of routing around broken money, this is the evolution. Local money breaking, you have cash dollars, but the portability is not there and it's physical. Then you have the stable coins, again, a less broken money, and then you have the Bitcoin with it in what the author's opinion.
So yeah, when the ledger is broken, the local ledger is broken, they route around it. Global trade needs a settlement asset so people converge on the least bad option available. And as technology improves, new escape hatches appear, essentially.
Right. Trade-offs of modern digital money. So you got big money, right? And that's convenient, but it's censorable and fragile. Regular bank money we're talking about here. And we're not talking about necessarily physical dollars, but you can think of Visa, right? Stable coins, that's portable dollars, but you still have an issuer risk. What is that? The stablecoin is still a flexible ledger. They're regulated to some extent, so on and so forth, but you really don't know if they decide to issue more stable coins or not, and if how much they, because they're supposed to have a certain amount of backing of treasuries, a backing of Bitcoin, stablecoin issuers back it with Bitcoin as well, and gold and other things. But you don't know how much they're doing that for, right? And then you have CBDC, so that's a central bank digital currency. So that's going to be backed by, the banks. It's going to be quite efficient, but they're going to have 1984 style surveillance where they can shut off your money if they want to unbank you. They can also put a time limit on your money. There's all types of things that are going on with CBDCs. Then you have, okay, again, Bitcoin, bearer instrument. As far as, you have it, you give it to someone else, final settlement. It's verifiable. You can't have fake Bitcoins. Too easy to be able to tell if it's fake or not. In order for someone to try to, do some type of counterfeiting or what have you. But it's very volatile. So within the community, they basically say the rule of thumb is 3 years up, 1 year down. And in the down year, you're going to be sad, right? And you have to self-custody it. So it's going to be more complicated than the convenience of these other forms of money. So these are trade-offs with the digital. Now, some of the things that the author says would be a good practice for you to think about in your own life as far as dealing with money is say have a money stack, right? Intentionally. So you have your spending money, obviously, liquid, convenient. Those are the properties you want of that type of money. Visa is what comes to mind, that kind of thing. Emergency money, accessible offline. The first thing that comes to mind for me is like, dollars in the mattress is what people used to think of this emergency type money. But these are properties you want, some type of accessible offline. How are you going to do that? Savings money, remember, store value, harder to debase. You don't want the king shaving off pieces of the silver and then say, go ahead and use this like it's $200 worth of silver. Is really 100, right? That's what they're doing when they print dollars and you try to save in dollars. You're going to have something that has a better store value. Then escape money. So portable across borders. Again, you want to escape Lebanon. You want to move. Okay. How are you going to do that? You can't just go into the bank, take all the money, go through the airport with all of that. You will be, first of all, you probably wouldn't even be able to get out the bank, but they're going to stop you at the airport. Now, reality check, custody and counterparty risk. You can be unbanked. You can have your bank deposits frozen. JP Morgan can say, we no longer want to bank with you. We're shutting your account down. And you don't have to give you any reason, right? That's one of the things going on there. Now, markets can close, right? So remember, capital controls, that's moving money from one account to another, or moving across borders, or moving from one market to another. When any of those happen, even markets, moving money from one to another, your money becomes less saleable, and you have to reason about that when you're dealing with deciding what type of money you're going to deal with. Safe bonds, so treasuries, talking about like these treasury bonds, they can lose purchasing power, right? So they may not be so safe, right? Because you're racing against inflation. And we just talked about all the issues that the banks have when they're dealing with it. So, and also, if you don't have this whole idea with the digital money, if you don't have custody of it, you really don't own it. You have an IOU, and you have all of the problems with what we're talking about with the ledger rules and claims and all this, so on and so forth. So really, that's what you're dealing with. Now, the conclusion: money is politics. Again, ledger, governance, and network effects. But going inside, another way to think about that, abstracting that, is politics, physics, and networks. Right? When you're dealing with some kind of money that might be a commodity, we're going to have the physics. You can even think of the digital money when you're dealing with time and energy, as far as what they call within the community, the Bitcoin community, they call it proof of work. You're still dealing with physics. You're having some kind of barrier so that you can't just issue the money and print it. Governance is the hidden variable. The whole idea of this talk, I would say the abstraction from the book, is to have this mental model of reasoning about ledgers. And the hidden variable of the ledger is the governance of the ledger rules, right? Again, who can change the rules and give access to whoever they want. We have technology shifting the feasible set. What does that mean? The new technology allows you to have new kinds of ledgers that are verifiable in new ways, faster ways, better ways, right? So you have a new set of types of money and types of ledgers. What this whole idea of this whole talk was to try to give you tools so that you can reason and pick your trade-offs consciously between the money.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, and with that, I want to leave us with one model, one story, and one action, right? So the one model is this: build your money, stack with intention. Don't let the default system choose for you. You need different tools for different jobs, spending, emergencies, savings, and escape. The one story is the escape hatch ladder. It shows that it isn't theoretical. It's happening right now. It's a story of human ingenuity and the search for a better ledger. The one action for everyone listening, and this is, I mean, literally everyone listening, tailored to what you're here for. If you're looking for an exit path, your first step is to audit your own money stack. What percentage of your wealth is in fragile state governed ledger, right? AKA fiat. Your action this month is to start building your escape money layer. Get a self-custody wallet and buy a small non-life-changing amount of, Bitcoin if you haven't already. Your goal isn't to get rich. It's to own a piece of a user-governed ledger that no one can devalue or freeze. If you're here to build and understand the system, your action is to analyze a decentralized project you respect through the lens of ledger governance. Who can change the rules? Is it truly user-governed, or is there a foundation or core team with an issuer surface? Identify the hidden choke point. Understanding that is the first step to building a system that doesn't have one.
Yeah, I like how you put that. And I'd say, we can leave it like that. The final comment is, if you want some of the companion links for this episode, we're going to try to put them in the show notes. We'll try to add a one-page checklist that you could use to analyze monetary systems, base layer, so on and so forth. Like B. Sovereign was talking about, where are the choke points and what happens under stress when you're dealing with a monetary system. And if you disagree with our framing, drop some of your counterclaims into the comments and provide some evidence so we can go ahead and look that up. Also, take a look at BitLemmas.com for more information.
All right. See y'all next week.
Thanks.